In today's episode of the Maverick Mystic Arts podcast, we're going to discuss intention. Now, when we are beginning to work on our black and white mirror and we're working through the spiritual path, very often we engage in a process of forcing illusions of a purer view, a purer mindset, etc. And these can serve a purpose. This can be helpful. But it can also hold us back because we get stuck looking at the newly cultivated intention. And as always, we're viewing it from the place that we were when we created it. And so as we keep progressing, that locked stagnancy of that old view of what that intention might mean, that will hold us back, right? It's just going to create a bunch of resistance. So there are reasons to cultivate, even for a time being, these purer, we could say, intentions or pure views. And that is in the context of Antidotes. This is very well described in a number of different traditions. So look through a bunch of traditional types of training, and you'll find this very well described where particular antidotes, say compassion, on and on and on the list goes, can be applied as an antidote for a poison, right? And maybe the poison is anger or jealousy or this, that, the other thing. And they have very particular antidotes that one is to meditate on to help with the dissolution of that particular poison. Now, how this actually works is that the antidote is a poor proxy for truer emptiness, right? It helps to alleviate or alter, it can do both. It can alleviate the blockage that is creating the poison. It can also alter the shape of the blockage to allow some type of transmutation to occur, so there's actually a shift that can take place. Now, obviously, you want the alleviation of the blockage, and that alleviation allows for the through flow of energy so that that particular poison is not being invigorated and not continuously being reinvigorated just by the habits that are in place. So to help take care of the bad habit that is creating the poison, it is a bad habit of view, a bad habit of emotion, the shapes that these take, right, which will, of course, arise either because of elemental imbalances and also, of course, cultivate and create and reproduce further chains of elemental imbalances. This is a somewhat convoluted process to discuss, but as your awareness picks up, you want to be able to feel all these things. Why is it good to feel all these things? Well, if you have clear perception of what it is that you are experiencing, then none of this is airy-fairy. None of this is something that you have to try to memorize and that you have to try to remember this particular antidote and this particular poison and do all this mental, puzzle piecing together and connecting the dots, right? It is very, very tangible. It's not theory. None of this is theoretical. So I never speak of things that I don't have direct experience with. And this is because the one time I did way back to a teacher of mine, he looked at me and he was like, "Oh, you've read that in a book." And I was like, "Oh, never doing that again." But here's the thing, is everything comes from direct, tangible experience. And you want this in your own practice. So one of the easiest ways to get this to begin happening is to cultivate awareness, deep and refined awareness of movement and stagnancies of mind, habits of movement, habits of pattern, habits of stagnancy, habits of density, habits of shape, on and on and on. The same applies to the emotional landscape. to the energetic landscape, and of course to the body itself. And because of this awareness, you can then perceive very clearly what damage a poison does. Why is it called that? Why is jealousy a poison, right? Is it just because it can create havoc in relationships and cause, turmoil and conflict and murder and war and all this stuff? No. That, of course, can be a byproduct of the poisons, anger, etc. But it is internally a poison for yourself. You are giving yourself poison. So there's a saying, which I can't remember, to the effect of your own by hating that person, you're only hurting yourself. And so engaging in the habits of mind, energy, emotion, of body that are of these poisons, it's literally that. You're literally poisoning yourself. So how do you first begin to deal with these poisons? Well, you take an antidote, some type of medicine. And the antidotes are medicines to the poisons. And they can be quite particular. However, like I said, you don't necessarily need to connect the dots all the time, try to match everything up, if you can actually feel what's happening. And the antidotes, you can also discover them. They will force their way into your consciousness, into your awareness, by necessity. If you have the background, or we could say overarching goal of your practice being the non-duality and that nothingness, that luminous emptiness, that empty luminosity, that existence in as of the thing behind all things, from which all things arise. Because of that, the antidote can force its way in. And you'll notice whatever the particular poison you've developed is, that antidote can rush in, and it will force a change, and that change will be of a particular type of release, almost like a shape of release, but sort of not, that takes care of the tensions and self-harm of that poison. Okay? Now, where we get into the weeds with all this is when we begin to identify with the antidote, when we begin to pedestalize the antidote, and when we begin to ascribe and then impose future meaning and action onto the antidote. And then we lock the meaning of the antidote into a particular subset of actions and meanings, and on and on. And this is then creating another type of poison, albeit less poisonous, hopefully. So this is how a lot of the black and white mirror work in the beginning happens. It's very active. Here's a negative quality. How do I deal with it? Now, we have to remember that dealing with the poison, the antidote, is a good way to gauge if it's taking effect is if there is a deep release. The tension, the shape, the congealed nature of that poison starts to dissolve within the presence of that antidote. Now, the antidote is still an idea, and it is still contrived, and eventually we have to move beyond it. It is leading us towards something that is greater. And that greater thing is what we might call, what do I call it? The universal safety mechanism, right? And this is referred to in different ways, primordial protection, and on, these different ways of describing this. How it first presented to my own awareness was as a universal safety mechanism, which is coming into deep realization of your personal Akashic consciousness, the aspect of you that is one and of infinity. This is much different than working a feeling perception of the Akasha from the three-dimensional you. Okay, so that's a difference. And you will arrive at that realization when you do. Now, why is that the universal antidote? Because it takes care of those tensions automatically. It releases the poisons. The release of the poisons, the release that is necessary for the poisons to give way, also cultivates the presence of the antidotes, we might say. But they don't mean what we thought they meant from the place of, viewing them from the poisons, right? They are spontaneously arisen as a byproduct of your realization of within and as your personal Akashic consciousness. That is how they come to be. Because of this, things can be quite zany and crazy and not necessarily make 100% sense, but the shift and the through flow, the non-cohesion, the lack of stagnation, that is the emptiness that you're looking for there. And so this then applies across the board. If you're doing crazy high octane energetic work, it will stimulate all kinds of crazy stuff. And you might feel like your heart's gonna explode. And you can work actively with a type of antidote to deal with whatever the poison that's being stimulated by the super high octane light. Because remember, it's going to be the resistance to that super high octane energy. That is what will create that explosion that's going to happen. Because it's in the way of that energy. So what is not in the way of that energy? How do we create space? How do we alleviate that poison? Is existing from the place and working the practices from the place of the universal or the personal Akashic consciousness. And because that is the universal safety mechanism, it auto-empties. So the channels, we could say, become clear, the energy can pass through. It empties and eliminates that which is finite, which is what that energy is getting stuck on. This near infinite and infinite energy is getting stuck on the finiteness of what is there, right? And identity is one of those things, one of those finite things that the energy gets stuck on. So, what this means is that the evolution of the practicer, of the adept as a human being, can happen as a byproduct of surrender, of emptiness, of release, of very, very high energetic meditation, and how everything interplays. Why? Because the emptying of that which creates the poisons occurs, right? And so the antidotes arise of their own accord spontaneously as more correct view and action. But these aren't views. Let's say compassion, tender-heartedness, lists go on and on. These aren't ideas. These aren't shapes and forms that we've imposed meaning on. They are spontaneous arisings of nothingness, of an emptiness that is a byproduct of the through flow of the energy. Okay, because it's not getting stuck. So, purifying your intentions, this is all good. Cultivating the white side of your black and white mirror, this is all good. Developing yourself choicefully, consciously, this is all good. There will come a time where everything that we have created, no matter how good, needs to be given up for the next thing or the next no thingness, right? It has to be given up. And one of the pitfalls we run into if we try to give things up from a place of ego and superiority is that we will start doing all kinds of just silly, cruel things and go, oh, it's spontaneous, blah, blah, blah. That's why I did this horrible thing and that horrible thing. It's the emptiness, and, I'm just a conduit for divine light, etc., etc. So you really want to make sure your discernment is on point and that you are truly relinquishing. You're truly letting go of all these clouds of hazy, murky, bits of self and identity, so that this can actually be a developing process. It's so common that as we practice, we have one experience of something that's so fleeting, it rushes by in, less than a second, a fraction of a second, and we go, oh, I've attained this thing. But this is not usually the case. What is a fraction of a second? We want to work that, not to reproduce it, but to understand and find more stable realization of the emptiness that allowed for that to occur. Okay, we never want to try to reproduce. That's just a whole mess in and of itself when it comes to this particular side of the practice. Okay, so this is a type of openness, and we want to remember that the physical skills, the practical skills, what we encounter in the physical world on a regular basis, the habitual expression of the integration we've gone through when it comes to really connecting with, it's not the right word, but realizing deeper realizations. Whatever path that might be, that will often be where these skills express, where the expression of your openness and these spontaneous antidotal arisals start to happen, will often be through what you are already very good at, because the ability for the grooves, the ability for the mind, the emotions, the energy, the body to act through those pathways has already been built quite strongly. So we want to be wary of imposing the quality of, or the proof of attainment of development, and limiting that to a particular skill set, or any particular, how could we describe this? Any particular external expression, right? So if you've done a lot of Tai Chi, this might express through Tai Chi skills, through increased types of groundedness and movement and understanding of force and body, and taking force into emptiness and taking force into different parts of the body and blah, 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 where your emotions and mind getting in the way of that force, whether it's the force of the mind coming in or the push coming in, etc., etc., and then learning how to empty all that out. If you are a healer, maybe this expresses through your healing. Maybe it's through your counseling or acupuncture or massage, and on it goes. Whatever you do, maybe you're, I've had a few students who've been hairstylists, and so fascinating how they take the skills and start working them within that modicum of expression. So whatever you do, another student who got a gig at a grocery store stocking shelves, and it surprised the hell out of him how much he loved it. And that's become engaging with the customers, the people walking around, helping people find what they're looking for. A very interesting exploration and expression of all this. So anyway, long story short, you have poisons. These are fabrications that are subconscious, and we want to make these conscious and release them. You have antidotes, which can help you deal with the poisons, and you have the universal safety mechanism of your personal Akashic consciousness. Now, you do not need to contrive antidotes if through this, these have dissolved, right? So if you are going the route of cultivating and contriving the antidotes, know that those will have to be let go of so that the very thing itself can evolve. Okay? I think that's it for this one. If you're interested in training, please check out the website. There are courses in Tai Chi, Hermetic Alchemy, and of course there is the Zenden, which is the Q&A reference library, and any questions you have, I throw out video answers for you there. And I think that's it for the moment. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for your time. Catch you next time. Bye.